Hello and welcome back to my Ace Sloop build made by Dumas. Now this is part 4, and in this episode I'm going to be fitting the sails and rigging. But between this episode and the last one I've been busy doing a lot of prep because I get the feeling this episode is going to be quite long anyway. Now first thing I've done is I decided to go ahead with supporting the rudder arm. Simply use a little piece of scrap mahogany. I'm going to thread the rubber band that it asks you to thread through there. If you do it normally, you just loop it over the top, but I thought this was quite flexible and thought you could do with a little bit of support. A few other bits and pieces I've done. The stand, pretty simple, self-explanatory, not going to go into any details on that one. And I've been working away at the masts and booms. Now, nothing particularly difficult when it comes to building these. If you want to slide the sail with the rings on the sail, don't put the brace on because you won't be able to fit it over the top. There's just not enough room between the rings. It's a little bit tricky lining up some of these screw eyes. I found putting a thin nail through the pre-existing hole helped me line it up top and bottom wise, and then it's simply a case of really lining it up properly, really double checking it before you go ahead and drill. Another thing that the steps recommend to do is lash the base where the screw eyes will go in to stop the wood from splitting. I'd recommend doing this. It's quite a big screw eye for quite a thin piece of dowel. And then the other bit I've done to them is I've varnished them to protect them from the elements. As I'm doing the mast rings a little bit differently, I've already placed them onto it all. Be aware, don't glue the rings in, as you're going to have to take them off in order to fit a few bits and pieces on the sails and the mast rings. So once you've drilled the holes, take them back out again and you can fit them again at a later stage. Another bit of prep I have done in between each episode is iron out the sails. This is best done in between a couple of pieces of cloth, as these being a plastic based material, they will melt if you just put an iron straight onto them, so don't go doing that. And then I've gone about and I've marked all of the places where the stitchings will be on the finished sail. Now, the instructions for these are a little bit vague. There's a lot of about 3/4 of an inch and about 1/2 inch. Well, I marked them out with 3/4 of an inch and 1/2 inch and found it was perfectly fine. I don't understand why they've worded things a few of the ways they have. It does make you scratch your head for a little bit, but the more you read through the plans and stare at the illustrations, the more sense they tend to make. Yeah, it's all a bit complicated. I've seen quite a few people going on about these plans for the rigging, but again, the longer you look at them, the more sense these things tend to make. What it doesn't make sense though is why they've give you 2 different ways to rig it and they only show you one. I think this is the running rig. Seems to be the running rig from what's vaguely described. But yeah, before you carry on with doing any of the sails and any of the rigging in this kit, really read the life out of these plans. A few hours of reading them and you start to make sense of these confusing little bits. If I can find it on the plan, right here, which wire's which. It's like trying to unpick all of the different threads to work out where they go. And one last thing I've also done, but I'm not going to scramble to find them, is I've done all the bowsers. Now in the kit they give you some styrene to make the bowsers. I've decided to use a little bit of scrap birch I had kicking around, as most of the kit's actually made of wood, and I thought it would look a bit classier, a little bit nicer with some nice wood bowsers. It does say to make sure you glue the styrene over with some super glue before you drill it, as apparently it's quite brittle, but I haven't done that, so can't fully report on that. It did seem a little bit brittle from the handling of it though. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on with rigging this up. And there's the first bit of rigging on. This is the rudder tiller sheet. It says to cut out 12 inches of cord for this. You end up with about 2-3 inches spare. If you use the full 12 inches, this just hangs completely slack, and I doesn't look like from any of the diagrams that that would lead to it working in any way, so a little bit of a note for you there. With a couple, this is all the excess I've got from that. I think they do actually, well, I'm hoping they do give leeway for you tying the knots, but yeah, that's gonna hopefully keep it running straight and true. A little bit of advice with the cord that they give you: it fluffs out, it really likes to spread out. A little bit of super glue on the ends of them before threading future holes, I think. And I've made myself a little improv needle, if I can find it. There we go. Little improv needle out of some bent over wire. I'll be finding out a proper needle to do the sewing. But yeah, that's the first bit of the rigging. So I'm not following the instruction steps at this point. I'm actually just going with what makes sense, as I don't think it would be easy to fit that once all the mast and the other bits are getting in the way. Anyway, on to the next bit. A handy little tip with the dispenser is the dispenser is 6 inches long, and all the measurements they give you for cord are divisions of 6. So it's simply a case of counting how many times you've unwrapped it until you get to the measurement. So I hope you know your 6 times table. Now I've gone away and stitched the boom to the sail. Fairly easy. Nothing really tricky to watch out with for that. It's easier if you're on something squidgy though, as you can poke the needle through from this side and then under, and just keep going without having to continually flip the thing over. One thing to note, I've also sewn the mass rings on. These are yeah, they're a little tricky. You want to make sure you put a drop of super glue to secure the knots, as I think some of them I've had to redo a few times. So I'm going to just glue as I go now, rather than doing it all in one step. So yeah, with that done like that, if we can get it right, it's time to fit it onto the deck. As you can see, it's looking quite nice. Still needs the hoist on the top there. That's going to be raised up a little bit, allows it to swing as it has done so nicely. But yeah, I'm going to get on with the next stage of the rigging, and I'm going to put the cross pieces on to support it, stop it flapping around the place. Right, I'm going to get on with that. There's the back stay, hooked on the base, tied to the bowser, through the bowser, carries on up. If it will focus, there we go, and tied to the top. So that's the back stay. Main halyard, simply through the hole in the top of the sail, up through the ring at the top of the mast, through the bowser, and then onto the ring at the front of the mast. Blooming difficult to film this, as everything wants to focus on everything else as it's thin, so I've had to lie it down. Anyway, on to the next bit. Now I've added the forestay, because having the backstay on and not the forestay on meant it was going backwards all the time. So tied to the ring at the top, through the pre-drilled hole at the top, down through your bowser, and through an S-hook and clipped onto the ring at the front. Fitting the shrouds is quite simple, makes the whole structure a hell of a lot sounder. Simply up through the hooks, into the bowser, through the brace, through the hole at the top on the ring at the top, and then down the other side exactly the same. I will say at this point that the amount of string they give you is pretty much the exact amount, and if you're building one of these, I'd recommend that you just rig it as you go, ignore the measurements, just make sure you give yourself a little bit of adjuster room. They said to use a 60-inch piece for putting these on. This entire piece is 60 inch, this is what's left, and yeah, that's barely probably more 35. That's not exact measurement, don't copy that one, but yeah, they really overestimate the amount of cord you need while giving you less than you need. So that's a bit of a negative when it comes to this final stage, but we'll see if we can rig it with what's left. I'll let you know if I don't, but yeah, I was cutting the measurements out exact. Anyway, pressing on, that's the main sheet fitted, tied to the S-hook, through the bowser, along the boom, through the hole, round and back into the bowser. A little bit of faff later. That's the jib club sewed onto the jib, and I've got the thread ready to put the jib haul on, so I'm going to fit that next. And that's the jib haul line installed. Simply up through the sail, up through the bowser, up and along through the hole on the front of the mast, and then back into the bowser. Now one last bit to go and we're done. But we have literally not even a foot of string left. They do give you a little bit more, but it's so blooming close. And yeah, don't listen to how much they say to use, because it's a little bit excessive. And yeah, really been cutting corners with the string on the last ones. And last but not least, that's the jib sheet installed. Simply tie onto the eyelet on the jib boom, through the eyelet on the deck, through the bowser, along the deck, through the eyelet, and then back into the bowser. Now, this tiny little bit of cord is all the spare cord that I've got. So if you're building this, don't leave great big blooming bits hanging off the end of your knots, because you ain't going to have the spare. And I've made one small mistake. Fortunately it was a small one, so I think I got away with it, but it's about 6 inches of string left out of all of it. Right then, that's the build finished. It's time to show you the whole package deal. And that's her all said and done. Sure enough, she's not perfect, and for anyone who's watched this video all the way through, well, thank you. And secondly, you've seen all the little mistakes that have happened with this along the way. But regardless of that, I'm quite happy with how she's turned out. Now all there is to do is to put her out on the local boating lake and see how she goes. For 30 quid, I'd say this kit's well worth it. Sure enough, they don't give you enough cordage to make many mistakes making the rigging. The mahogany is a little bit brittle, and some of the instructions are a little bit poorly worded. But all in all, it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely earned its money's worth in time spent and enjoyment. So yeah, that's the end of this build project. For anyone who's been watching and building one of themselves, I hope you found the video helpful. And if not, I just hope you found the video entertaining. Anyway, until next time, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.